got a couple more panels. This has been so fun and so exciting because, you know, we love showcasing content, but we don't often get the ability to bring in our filmmakers, to bring in our experts, to really dig into, you know, the whole creative side of things as well as the inspiration. So this is an amazing panel. That's just one of many. Tomorrow we have protecting pangolins and preventing pandemics. And that's with Habitat XR and with the International Anti-Poaching Foundation, Akashinga, as well as the Swalu Foundation, featuring Damian Mander, Ulrico Grech-Kumbo, and Wendy Pineno. And this is all available on earthxr.org, so you can access it there. We're on channel 3 in case you get a little lost. There's 4 channels going simultaneously on the live feed. On the 26th, we have virtual diving with Google Earth's filmmakers Underwater Earth, Christophe Bailash and Sophie Ansel. And our final panel is XR Storytelling Across the Border, which is going to be a Spanish language panel, Historias Transcendiendo las Fronteras, with Marta Ordeg from Garage Stories, Adrian Lopez from Guanajuato International Film Festival, Ivan Sawyer Garcia, and Hector Valdez Padilla, who are from the Voices and Colors of the Earth. So it's really exciting. Another thing to tell you about is that, you know, we've done our best to really continue to support our filmmakers and to support people at home by updating our website to include all these different links where you can go and find out more information, as well as watch some of this great content that's available online. So please check out earthxr.org.
Thank you so much, Kristen. So we have a really amazing lineup today, and we're really honored to have our panelists here today, really heroes for the waters and for the humans. You know, we always say, like, we are all earthlings at EarthX, and so we have people here who are documenting crimes out on the high seas that are harming the environment and also are very much human rights issues. And we want to talk about that intersection of human rights and environmental abuses. So I'm going to let you guys introduce yourself, and Ian, I'll let you kick it off.
My name's Ian Urbina. I'm a journalist, and I wrote a book called The Outlaw Ocean, which is a journalistic project that explores the 2/3 of the planet that's water, and quite specifically looks at the diversity of lawlessness that occurs out there.
And Lucas?
My name is Lucas Gath, and I am the director of Ghost Fleet VR and the director of photography of Ghost Fleet, the feature film, for which the directors were Shannon Service and Jeffrey Waldron, with Vulcan and Katovia. The 2 projects look at slavery in fishing boats in Southeast Asia, and they go hand in hand, one being a short form project in VR, Immersing Yourself, and the other one, the longer project currently on Apple TV.
Thank you. And Noel?
Hello, everyone. I'm Noel Mendoza. I'm the Human Trafficking Outreach Director at Mosaic Family Services, and we provide direct outreach and other outreach activities to potential victims, at-risk populations, and vulnerable communities throughout the North Texas area.
And we are so grateful for all of you guys to be here. And, you know, just to tie this all in, like Lucas, I think you were the first, you know, of people here that we kind of highlighted at our festival. And we did that in partnership with Mosaic and North Texas Coalition Against Human Trafficking. And so we showed Ghost Fleet VR at the festival last year, and also had the film. And then we kind of aligned again around Oceans Week with the additional work you were doing, taking it on the Peace Boat. And then Ian, I met you at Oceans Week. And then, you know, it was like, we saw you at the Parlay for the Oceans. And then we were like so impressed with everything that we brought you into Arcadia Earth to be part of our Climate Week project. And then Noel, we have, you know, I've worked with Mosaic for a really long time, you know, on the anti-trafficking. And then when Ghost Fleet came up, it actually gave us the opportunity to tie in you know, this issue of human rights along with, you know, environmental abuse. And Ian, you have the kind of the broadest overview of this issue. So we're going to start with a video. So Josh, it's going to be the Outlaw Ocean book promo, the Ian Urbina Outlaw Ocean book promo. And that will kind of...
I think of the ocean as this space that has been kind of a metaphor for freedom, and it still is that. You know, it is a place that people go to escape rules and escape government and escape other people because it's so expansive. But those very allures of the space are what has made the ocean a scary place. Don't take photos. Don't take photos. I keep the camera down. Few places on the planet are as lawless as the high seas. The ocean is a place of amazing beauty, but it's also this dystopian realm where severe inhumanities occur, and often with impunity. Over. What you realize when you're in that void or in that expanse is that most of that space is ungoverned and ungovernable. There are few laws, and what laws exist are murky and overlapping and contradictory. Laws are only as good as their enforcement, and the enforcement mechanisms for any of the laws are anemic at best. You have human trafficking, sea slavery, abuse of stowaways, weapons trafficking. When the UN looked at it in 2009 and they interviewed Cambodian deckhands, over 50% of them had witnessed murder. A lot of the forced labor that end up on these fishing boats are trafficked migrants and are very poor and easily taken advantage of. One mariner summed it up as, this line of work is like jail with a salary, except the salary is not guaranteed. We in the West would like to think that things are progressively getting better, and in many ways they are, but in this space, things are arguably getting worse. Over 99% of crimes that occur out there go unreported. And there's not a huge point in reporting them because it's never clear who would actually do anything with that information. I think if there's anything to be learned about human nature from the Outlaw Ocean, it's that we all have this visceral capacity to behave in ways that we thought civilization had stamped out. There's a vanishingly thin line between civilization and the lack of it. And I think the exploration of this frontier is an attempt to look at how thin that line is and what's on the other side.
So, Ian, that content has been showing on the other channels, and we keep getting people discussing like how incredibly powerful the storytelling is and how much they're blown away by the storytelling and the content. Can you discuss a little more of everything that you explored and saw?
Sure. Yeah, so the Outlaw Ocean origin story is one that starts with the New York Times, where I was on staff for 17 years, and its goal was, as a sort of standard investigative journalistic series that set out to accomplish a couple things. One was to take readers out to this space that they rarely think about, and yet is fundamentally important to our survival. 50% of the oxygen we breathe comes from the oceans, and 90% of the products we consume travels by way of ocean. There are 56 million people who work out there, but it's rare that you hear stories about what happens out there. So we thought it would be a service to go out and chronicle the people and the place. And then I worked on a ship for a while, and I had a sense that this frontier, if you will, is different than that on land, and it's different in many ways, one of which is it's beyond the reach of the law, and a lot of things extra legal things happen out there, many of them bad, but not all. And so one goal was to journalistically to chronicle and sort of expand the spectrum of understanding about what happens out there. So where most people think of maritime crime, they think of the BP spill or Somali piracy. And what the series and ultimately the book set out to do was to show them that there's a diversity of other human rights, labor, and environmental abuses happening out there. And it covered, the murder of stowaways in the post 9/11 moment, and arms trafficking, and the pervasiveness of private maritime security guards who operate with impunity, sometimes killing, sometimes even on camera, and yet no governments seek to investigate or prosecute. It looked at the extent, the environmental problem, not just of oil spills, but of intentional dumping of oil, to the tune of more oil is intentionally dumped at sea by ships than the Exxon Valdez and BP spills combined every 3 years. It looked at illegal whaling, professional repo men who steal ships on behalf of private firms and banks, and a range of other things, including the sort of deep-seated problem of forced and trafficked labor, sometimes called sea slavery. So that was one strand of the things it looked at, and to some degree is a perfect segue for what Lucas has done with Ghost Fleet.
Yeah, so thank you so much for that. And it's just kind of like wild how much this covers in your book. And so we are also going to, in the chat, send people to theoutlawocean.com and encourage people to support this reporting, because without this reporting, we can't kind of get the on the ground, help, or out in the high seas help. So Lucas, to that point, you were at our festival and we're in a Q&A, and there was a conversation about, how you had been kind of over dangerous reporting and dangerous documentary work because you had a gun held to your head more than one time, and you were kind of done with that. But that Shannon Service, the director on the feature, you were the cinematographer and then co-director on the VR, had convinced you that you would be okay. And then I asked you afterwards, like, what is that about? And you said that, these people on this trafficking boats did not think they were doing something wrong. And that disconnect that a lot of people have about how the traffickers don't see themselves as perpetrators, the victims often don't see themselves as victims, and the police and government are often not seeing these environmental abuses or the abuses of humans that way. Can you discuss what you saw, and then also kind of why you wanted to do this in VR?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Before this, I was held at gunpoint 5 different times, actually, in many different countries. And when I met Shannon, I think Shannon, like Ian, they come from a journalistic background. Shannon is a person who's very careful and very thorough. She understands what she is going into, and we had this conversation. She explained to me what we were doing, why it was important, and to be honest, for me, when she first started telling me about everything that was happening out there about slavery, it was shocking, right? Because I consider myself to be pretty well informed, and I didn't know about it, and that was shocking already. So I realized that this was in plain sight, and I think the biggest issue is that we think about slavery and we think about shackles and chains and this and that, and it doesn't. Modern slavery wasn't like this, and that's part of what you're mentioning. It's sometimes many of the men who were enslaved in boats didn't consider it was in slavery because it was sort of like this slow middle gray area that they would consider that it just looked like they were simply being taken from one step to the next. So a lot of times we were there, and they were showing us what was going on, things that were breaking, from human rights to things that were for us would be considered common sense at this point, honestly. And they didn't think that they were showing us anything wrong. They just were wondering why we would want to shoot that. But that never really occurred to them that what was being done to them was so bad. After a couple of years, after not being paid, after not being able to leave a boat, because some of these boats would be, out in the oceans for years at a time with a mothership that would come and just take the fish and leave supplies. So, it was sort of like this gray area of, well, you could leave if you wanted to. I'm just not planning on going back with this ship, right? And I think the reason why I decided to do a VR short piece with Shannon was when she approached me about it, I felt like the documentary was amazing, but while being out there, it's hard to grasp the vastness of and the desperation that this can create, because we think about jails and we think about bars and we think we have this very clear concept, but we never think of a jail just being water around you. There's nowhere you can go. You're in a boat. And I felt like when I pointed the camera in one direction, I wasn't really being able to show what it truly means, that desperation of being surrounded by. It's not in one direction, and there's nothing to see in any direction, to the point where many of these men have committed suicide. Many of them who don't know how to swim, who will jump in the water. Many of them will find different ways. And because of this, we thought that an immersive piece was important. I personally don't think that VR is for every story, but for this one, it was able to help us generate empathy and understanding of an issue that is in plain sight, but it's harder to treat because the shackles and the bars aren't there.
And that ties into, like, Ian, you have a chapter in your book called Jail Without Bars. And like, having grown up around the beach, I remember my stomach kind of dropping when I heard that, because to me, the beach was always this source of nourishment, and it was like home and not something violent. And but what you both have done so incredibly in this, is kind of through the storytelling and through the visuals, has kind of made the unwatchable watchable. Like, this is horrible stuff happening, but the cinematography and the storytelling and everything is so extraordinary. So on that note, I'm going to, Josh, let's go to the Ghost Fleet trailer with Fatima, and we'll show kind of like some of that beautiful cinematography that goes along with this harsh content.
เราถูกบังคับให้ทำงานเกือบแทบจะไม่ได้เห็นแผ่นดินเลยถูกตีหางกระเบียนตีถูกบริษัทตามล่าทั้งวันทั้งคืนวันนั้นมีผู้หญิงมาแกก็ถามผมอีกว่าแล้วอยากกลับบ้านไหม
ကျွန်တော်တို့ပတိမာဘယ်လိုမြင်လဲဆိုရင်တော့လူတွေသက်သာရှိပါတော့
ก็คือฉันจะอยู่คือเรื่องมันเกิด30-40 ปีแล้วเนาะคนตายเยอะ
5 ปีได้น้ำเชียงจ้ะ12 ปีเลยครับ
แล้วปุ้ยไม่รู้ไหมว่ามาไปอินโดทำอะไร
ช่วยคนโอเคแล้วเดี๋ยวกลับมา
How many hours to Gaiman?
This really depends of the wind and current.
ลูกเรือคนแรกเนี่ยเขาก็จะบอกว่าเพื่อนเขาอยู่ไหนไม่ได้ใช่มันเหรอใช่ปะ
ไต้พลตัวกู้ย่าแดนลิง
ที่เบซิน่าเนี่ยเขาไม่ชอบเราอยู่แล้วล่ะเพราะว่าเราไปรู้
မြန်မာပွဲစားရယ်လမ်းတရဲရယ်ပလိတ်ရယ်တူတူအလုံးလုံး
ส่งคนมาด่าตะคอก
I know people has been killed because of this issue.
เฮ้ยนั่นอีกคนนั่นไงมอเตอร์ไบค์อีกคนนึงอยู่ตรงนั้น
ทำอะไรกันจะมา
kau tahu semua
So Noelle, following up to that, Mosaic and the North Texas Coalition Against Human Trafficking do amazing work in a local way, which, people can find organizations like yours around the world for ways that, after people see content like this, they might not know how to help or what they can do. Can you speak to how, organizations like yours can help victims in these situations?
Yes, thank you. A very important question. And first of all, let me thank you for having us on here. These kind of events are definitely necessary. Projects like Ghost Fleet, Outlaw Ocean are needed because it shines a light to a crime that thrives in darkness and shadows in the middle of the oceans and factories and agricultural fields where folks are isolated from one another. So bringing eyes and ears to these issues is extremely important. This topic is a very dark issue to talk about, but it's hopeful that we're having these conversations, right? And there are local organizations, agencies such as Mosaic Family Services, which are providing help to survivors, as you mentioned. Mosaic, as an agency, we are a nonprofit in North Texas, and we provide comprehensive services for victims of both labor trafficking and sex trafficking, males and females, adults and children. And all of the services are designed to be comprehensive in its scope and victim-centered and trauma-informed in its approach, right? So we provide shelter services, we provide legal services, which include both immigration law and family law. We have a counseling program, which is able to reach out to these survivors and begin that healing process. We have a transitional housing program, economic empowerment program. And as you notice, in order for us to truly respond to this issue in a comprehensive way, you have to have many institutions and systems into place partnering with one another. That's why we also partner and coordinate with the North Texas Coalition Against Human Trafficking, which is a local coalition that is comprised of over 35 agencies. And it is those partnerships that allow us to streamline either communication, information sharing, services procurement, all for the benefit for the survivor, right? I think as we're noticing here, one of the major issues when it comes to human trafficking is as we're getting more awareness, we're learning a lot about sex trafficking, and that is very important. Mosaic believes that sex trafficking is a very dark issue, and we're very happy that a lot of focus is on sex trafficking. But we also realize that labor trafficking is a very prevalent issue in Texas, in US, right? So bringing it more locally here in Texas, there's a study done that mentioned there are about 313,000 victims of trafficking in Texas today. This is a projected number, of which over 70% of those are labor trafficking victims. So while we maintain this focus on sex trafficking, it is also important to bring in, again, bring those eyes and ears to the issue of labor trafficking, so we're able to tackle that as well.
Thank you so much. And, you know, you kind of talked about this when we brought you in, that we were like, I think one of the first environmental organizations that you had worked with, you know, on this issue. And that's what's really important, is we're very much learning that we can, you know, get the environmental organizations and the human rights organizations working together and can be more powerful, because a lot of times if we can help the survivors and lift the survivors up, there's so much survivor-led work that then can go back and also help, you know, the oceans. And going back to you, Ian, you know, you also cover in your reporting a lot of organizations that Earthx Film and EarthXR and EarthX have worked with a lot: Sea Shepherd, Greenpeace, the Cousteaus, and you've taken a really unique approach to, you know, your music project to showcase some of that. And we'll show a little bit of video about that in a minute. Can you discuss like how you came up with that concept and how it's helping get this? I mean, 250 artists is amazing, and the reach, you know.
Yeah, so the music project is an oddball creation. The thought, it sort of grew from this basic thought, which was, why should movies be the only thing that have a soundtrack? Why can't a book have a soundtrack? And then the thought was, well, we have 5 years worth of footage, much of it from fairly thorny situations and, you know, intense contexts, and that a lot of which produced really interesting textured sounds. So machine gun fire in Somalia, or chanting Cambodian deckhands on the South China Sea, you know, radio captains yelling at each other. And so we thought, what if we were to build an archive of these sounds, you know, stripped from the video footage, And then we were to reach out to artists around the world of various genres, hip hop, classical, ambient, electronic, and invite them to make an album that's inspired by and sort of translating the stories and characters and scenes and topics in the book, and that also uses the raw material to the extent that they wanted of the sound archives, and sort of just give them license to be creators, which is what they are, and try to help propagate the message and the reporting that way. And I thought it would be maybe 5-6 artists, and now it's grown to this global thing, which has 320 artists from 60 countries and a combined listenership of 70 million. So it's been really amazing, and and we're rolling out new albums every 2 months. And it all is paired, the music is paired with footage from the reporting as just a sort of alternate way of, in some ways, hijacking Spotify and Pandora and turning them into journalistic outlets.
So we are going to show the Deosos video next to kind of highlight the Sea Shepherd work that you covered with this.
Great.
So Josh, you're going to roll. So Lucas, we wanted to talk next about kind of what Ian was speaking to, like the incredible reach that some of these projects have. And you did phenomenal work with the VR to get the word out. And Mosaic and North Texas Coalition were some of our local partners that were able to share the content online. I was talking to Vulcan the other day, and they were saying that it was like viewed over 1 million times. And so that content sharing is super important too. Can you speak also to, being at our festival and what also happened through your festival run and the work you did on the Peace Boat and everything?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I come from a filmmaker's background, and so most of the festivals that I used to, or most of the festivals that I've always done, have been very much focused on film itself, what was very unique about EarthX was that so much overlap from activists to filmmakers to students. I remember showing our piece to a lot of students. I think they were middle school, elementary school, and high school students that kept coming through, and so there was a very, very unique feeling, and there was it created a very unique space for us to be able to show this. It didn't feel like we were by filmmakers for filmmakers, but it was really something, and it wasn't also only for activists. It really felt like a space where a lot of it interacted, which is essentially what we need. I think a lot of times we come back to spaces to give information to people that already know it. Whereas here, it really, really became a joint effort. And I think that that got amplified. That was a little bit of what we wanted to do. And I think we accomplished it with those million views with the VR piece, because our strategy was to give it to any platform that was willing to believe and invest a level and extent of marketing dollars in it. It wasn't so much looking for profit as it was looking for exposure of the subject of the topic. And to that extent, we, from everyone from EarthX and in the festival and afterwards, and then to New York, to the UN Peace Boat, where we presented it. And even afterwards, I mean, I think a beautiful thing about these projects, this XR interactive projects, the same thing that Ian has done with music and a book and this, which is filmmaking into VR, is really just being able to find the best ways to communicate and to tell the subjects that are important to us without necessarily being sort of like locked into the one thing that we know, and be able to evolve and create. And as much as I love VR, I felt like it was good to tell this story, and the next story could be AR. It could be 35 millimeter film.
Mm-hmm. And to that point, we really look in our immersive area to get beyond VR. It's like it's virtual reality, it's augmented reality. We've had mixed reality, we've had projections. We were going to have a treadmill this year that would track every step you take, and the money would go to endangered species for like manatees and ocelots. So, we're bummed about some of that stuff that can't happen in person. And we were, when we heard the Outlaw Ocean Music Project, everyone was so blown away with that lineup that we were like, what can we do with this? And you had all this cool video content. And so we decided that, we were going to show this in kind of like a silent disco style, and people can put on headsets and, watch the content while they're listening to it. So we will show a little bit of what we, had planned for the festival next, with a couple of videos. So Josh, we can cue up the Nadav and the Bolier. And then after that, we're going to go into take actions and show everyone who's watching like some ways to support everyone here in the projects, to support the Outlaw Ocean, to support Ghost Fleet, and to support Mosaic and North Texas Coalition. And so after that, if anybody has any questions, if we have time, we'll get to some Q&A after that. So you can put your questions into the chat. So Josh, if you can start with Nadav.
An age shall come after many years when the ocean will loose the chain of things.
A watery domain in which all things are blurred and ships seem no more than phantoms.
I got involved in the project when Ian reached out. I looked into what he did and the way the project would come together, and I thought it would would be like a very interesting way of working with his audio to begin with, next to the story that goes behind it. So I started going through the audio material present, and I remember one of the first things that grabbed my attention was those Cambodian boys singing on those fishing boats, and I instantly knew like this could work really well, you know, using that audio and bringing it into music.
Overall, I think my approach and objective when making Lemuria was to showcase different aspects of the ocean. For example, tempestuous represented the anguish and pain and plight of working on the sea, much like the situations referenced in Outlaw Ocean, whereas Lemuria was representing the relaxing coastal, like, tropical element of the sea, where you would just go with your family to relax and have fun. Regarding impact, I think I leave that to the audience, as art is up for interpretation. But my personal thoughts on that is that I just wanted them to enjoy the songs and understand the concept that I was going for.
Thank you all for still being here with us. We are now going to go into some ways that people can help support these projects. If you're watching at home, we always as a festival want to push impact, that you know, these issues can be really kind of hard to look at sometimes. So we're always trying to find ways to tie in our audiences so that they feel like they can donate or volunteer or help spread the word. So we're going to start with Ian and go to his website to show, you know, what you would see if you went to the outlawocean.com, the reporting, the music project, more about Ian and reviews, and there's like a way to donate. Ian, can you speak to this? You mentioned before the importance of this journalism and to, you know, this journalism being funded. And can you talk a little to that?
Yeah. So I think what's different about the offshore realm is that there's very little journalism coming from out there. That's what made the Ghost Fleet stand out and Outlaw Ocean stand out. And yet there are a lot of people out there and a lot of pretty severe crimes happening. So I do think journalism has a distinctly important role to play, but it's also unusually expensive and difficult to do that kind of reporting. So, you know, the Outlaw Ocean is a nonprofit, and all the money that gets donated is funneled back into producing more stories for a variety of venues. And then the other way, at least to support this journalism, is just to listen to the music, because any revenue derived from the music is also funneled into new reporting.
And it's an amazing lineup. And so people can go to Spotify for this. And if you go into the Outlaw Ocean, into the music section. And then, so Lucas, I'm going to take us over to Ghost Fleet. There are some take actions on here about how people can join the campaign, support ethical seafood, and also helping Fatima. Do you want to speak a little bit to kind of what you know that LPN does?
Yeah, I mean, so LPN is the organization who's, they're very grassroots organization. They get on a boat, they go around and they pick up men who were enslaved and they were able to jump off, but a lot of them are stranded in one of the islands. For them, there's no way to really get back, even if they do get off the boat. So Fatima, I think at this point, has over 5,000 men who she has been able to bring back home. But again, you know, like Ian said, it is an expensive endeavor, and any support that can be done would be really great. It all goes directly to them, to Fatima and to LPN in Thailand. And then also there's a couple, I think a lot of us want to know how we can not be part of this issue, and there is some direct tips directly on the website for that.
Yeah, there's some great information here, and Vulcan also mentioned that they've been engaging a lot of chefs on this. The chefs have been asking how they can get, you know, abuse of the ocean and abuse of humans out of their food supply. They've got recommendations from Surfrider for ocean-friendly restaurants, these Greenpeace supermarket ratings. So, you know, just to help you at home not feel like hopeless for how to help here. And then for Mosaic Family Services, Noelle, here are the ways, you know, people have a variety of ways they can, you know, fill a grocery cart. They can provide play therapy for kids who've been traumatized. You have legal services, you know, and you can sponsor survivors. You have an amazing shelter. You know, it's just a really incredible space that treats survivors with a lot of dignity. Do you want to talk a little bit more to that?
Yes, I think when it comes to trying to join this fight, as mentioned, this is an issue that impacts societies, communities at large. So having the community as part of the answer is necessary. So we encourage you to look at the Mosaic website and other partner agencies and explore what role you can play in the fight, right? As Tiffany mentioned, we are always looking for donors in different ways people can contribute to the agency, but also if you're a dentist, find out how you can provide free dental services for some of the survivors that we work with. If you're a financial planner, you can do the same, right? If you're a passionate community member, find out and explore how you could become a volunteer and work at the shelter, just as Tiffany mentioned. We are always looking for passionate people to work with, and this is an issue. Again, it's an issue that we should all work together to tackle.
Thank you so much, Noelle. And, you know, to that point, we really want to, you know, encourage people that we understand not everybody can donate. You might not be in a position to donate, but if you can't donate, maybe you can volunteer. If you can't volunteer, maybe you can just spread the word. So, you know, we just try to always find ways to engage people where they are. So I'm going to go to some questions now. What are some of the challenges you've faced while trying to create this content, and how did you adapt to them? Your challenges were huge. So Ian and Lucas, do you want to speak to that? Ian, you want to start?
Sure. You know, this is reporting that took about 6 years to produce, so it's kind of a sprawling question. I think just journalistically, the challenge of documenting things at sea is very, you know, obvious. Getting out into the space and sort of staying out there is always a logistical challenge. So to chronicle the story of sea slavery took, you know, 2 months of negotiating and working, a photographer and I working our way from boat to boat to boat to get out far enough into the space where there was a certain type of fishing happening, where these sorts of cases were more prevalent. But, you know, reporting other issues, dumping of oil or murder of stowaways or arms trafficking, again, one of the goals was to always do it, to tell the stories offshore and on site. And it just takes a lot of time and patience and persistence in trying to convince people to carry you out there. And that's why it's so expensive, because all that time is money.
Mm-hmm. Lucas, do you want to weigh in too?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the things that Ian said apply to us as well. I mean, a lot of times from those moments where you were just trying to get in a boat, and sometimes, you know, they would say that you could, but then something would change and the weather would change, and then they decided that they were going to leave earlier than what they said, and you had to be on point. And then there's, of course, a safety issue, because even though a lot of the fishermen don't realize that this is a big of an issue as it is, they don't realize that they're in it. The men that traffic them do. And a lot of them, they get picked up in the markets. And when we would try and go and film at the markets, we had to be extremely careful. We had to be mindful. And like I said before, you know, I had a great team. Shannon had been working with Jeffrey on this subject for many, many years. And I was with a responsible team. So I think that did make it a lot easier. And then the technical difficulties of shooting something like VR, which is new. When we shot it, I built the camera from scratch in a way that wouldn't look like a camera, and it was great, and I was so happy. And then on the very first day of the shoot, it fell, and 3 of the 4 lenses broke. So it was, you know, we had to like I had to start cutting pieces out of the lenses and order replacements from China. It was I mean, absolutely insane. But I think a lot of this, we talk about it today, but I think some of the photos that we saw of Ian on his website, I relate a lot to it. I mean, a lot of it is just being out there and having to figure things out and tumble from one situation to the next and be responsible while doing it.
Yeah, that reminded me too, because I was talking to Jeff Abramson before, who is on our advisory council. Jeff is wonderful. He used to head up Discovery VR, and he's consulted for Sundance and Tribeca, and works with Vulcan and helped on this whole campaign. And he was talking about, he was like, you need to talk to Lucas because he's done this over and over again and he'll just make it happen. Like he was like, he already had so much to do with the cinematography and then he took on the VR in addition to that. And I was like, well, this is perfect because Ian does a million things too. So we've got two guys that really know how to multitask. This is a great question. Kind of aligned to our festival. How does the issue of human trafficking and modern day slavery intersect with climate change?
And I could
Ian,
jump
do you
at
want
that.
to?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of different ways to come at this. I mean, one of the most central one, at least in the issue of sea slavery, is A, the problem of overfishing, B, the problem of climate change. Both of those things have caused a collapse of near-shore fish stock. So where it used to take, a week to fill your hold on a ship, it now might take a month. And you would have to go much further out at sea to catch a bare minimum economically to be a viable fisherman. And going that much further out has other consequences in terms of the cost of fuel, and all of these cost factors conspire to make it a less profitable industry. And what that conspires toward is a greater use of forced labor and traffic labor, and labor that you end up never paying at all, because you're trying to cut corners on cost. So climate change has a direct impact on the environment, and then the environment becoming more strained has a direct impact on labor and human rights concerns.
And I wanted to kind of one thing that kind of I meant to mention earlier too is when we say labor trafficking, a lot of times this is kids. Like the ages that you both report in this are very, teenagers. And it's just, I want people at home, and Noelle, when we work with you all, we see this is hitting children a lot too. So when you think about the aftercare needs, it's, even more relevant. So another question about the issues and take actions. What are some important partnerships and efforts that are helping the cause globally? Ian, do you want to?
Sure. I mean, yeah, no, I mean, on the issue of sea slavery, if you think of the universe of stakeholders who can have an impact, you can think of governments who will probably legislate the problem toward the problem and toward a solution. And then you can think of market players, so big companies, big buyers of fish, and then you can think of the individual consumers. Those are your three categories of big players. There obviously is media and NGOs and other sort of players, but there's a lot going on around the issue of the supply chain. And that's a wonky term for knowing where your stuff comes from and whether it's sullied by environmental or human rights crimes. And companies have gotten away for many decades now with decidedly not knowing their supply chain and sort of outsourcing a lot of the production because it comes to them cheaper that way, and they look the other way as to what might be happening to make it so cheap. I think there's a lot of consumer pressure, government pressure, and now corporate pressure to fix that and get more accountability in the supply chain. And that's, again, where you see these different stakeholders trying to work together using satellites or using blockchain or using onboard cameras, lots of different ways to try to actually build the chain back so that you can know from hook to plate that there was no sea slave or 13-year-olds, or illegal shark finning involved in any of that process.
And I'm going to let Noelle, you speak to this a little bit. And just because we're getting closer to the end, I also, and before I forget, shout out to our team behind the scenes. So I want to thank so much Tammy Lynn Gilmore, who's been kind of wrangling and keeping us on point, producing all of this tech. Joshua Butler, who's been our tech guru behind the scenes, and Maddie Breddy, who gets us all the content and, you know, uploads websites and everything like that. And of course, Kristen Gutkunst, again, to our co-programmer. So Noelle, on that point too, you've spoken about like supply chain and these other things that people can, you know, go to, but you on the coalition have this whole, like, it takes all these partnerships to make this stuff happen. Can you speak to that?
That's exactly right. I think something that's I've always liked to say, think globally and act locally. Because there's so much awareness about this issue going around globally, we're starting to bring a lot of light to this crime. Partnerships are being developed based on that awareness. So we have partnerships within the North Texas Coalition, which reach across various sectors, including law enforcement at the local, state, and federal levels. We have social service providers. We have faith-based communities. Again, you have partnerships across the board that, again, serve for all of us and benefit the survivor, and it ensures that the work that we're doing is trauma-informed and victim-centered. Sometimes, as you can imagine, different institutions have different goals set out for them. So what should drive decision-making in those circumstances? It should be the needs of the victim and survivor, right? So as you mentioned, the partnerships are key, and that's one thing we encourage you is to always reach out to local agencies, whether it's law enforcement, social service providers, faith-based communities, whatever it may be. Reach out to those agencies and figure out how you can join this fight.
Thank you so much. And kind of like one of the next questions that had come in was like how governments are leading on this. Lucas, did you want to speak to the partnerships you've had? Because like Vulcan, you know, like that's everything that happened with you all. That's how the reach happened.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. And Vulcan has been one of a great collaborator with us because they were able to really help project this type of projects. They're really they have a mentality that they know how to really push them. Even some of the, you know, not only what we've done, but they've done projects where they're tracking boats through satellites. They have been working through a couple of blockchain projects. They talk to governments. The film was, I don't know if it finally did, it was going to be presented before all this started at the White House, pretty much. And it's being shown in Southeast Asia, in many countries. So there's definitely a lot of work that we're doing from that grassroots level and those associations, but there's also been a lot of that wider, larger understanding. I think both are really needed. We presented at the United Nations Peace Boat. We presented in New York at the United Nations, where Tan Lin, our main character, was able to go and was able to stand there last year, which was an amazing moment. And he was able to tell his story. And that's what we needed. We needed people like Tan Lin to be able to come into the United Nations in New York City and talk and be able to tell their story, because his story is the story of thousands of men today.
And that's exactly why we do this work. So that's a perfect moment to end on, because I know Josh is going to cut us off in just a second, so we don't have time for any more questions. But, you know, we at EarthX Film and EarthXR, this is why we do this work, is because we love working with, you know, organizations like you and projects like you all, because we know that it eventually does go to that UN level sometimes, and we can really impact policy. And I know when we were there that week and had seen those talks, everybody came out of those saying that it was just the most moving thing, and that it had such an incredible impact on them. So thank you so much, Ian. Thank you so much, Lucas. Thank you so much, Noelle. Thank you so much, our team behind the scenes, Kristen, Tammy, Josh, and Maddie. We appreciate you all so much. And so Josh is going to take us into some video for the next things up on our virtual fest.
The Baiji dolphin was extremely vulnerable. There was hundreds of them left. I mean, I thought, well, there's enough out there. Somebody's going to do something to save this animal. This animal, it wasn't just the last of its species, it was the last of an entire family of cetaceans. So I thought, humans, somebody somewhere has got to go out and save these animals. They have to, because they're dying off. They're all gone now. They went extinct. In my lifetime, they went extinct.
Before we launch, I want you to take a good look around. It's beautiful here, don't you think? Now, you may not recognise it, but take my word for it, this is your home. Here we go. Take off in 3, 2, 1. Are you still with me? We're now 300 meters above sea level and climbing. Have a look around. It might not look like the place you consider home, but give it another minute. You're now 100 kilometers above sea level and officially in space. Let's find a good place to stop. Take a deep breath and look at where you've come from. Do you recognize it now? You can no longer see the lake, the beautiful trees, or the green grass. But now you see why it's all part of the place that is our home. This amazing planet we all share. Looking at the Earth from space made me realize the interconnectedness between everything and everyone on that tiny, fragile and precious blue dot. I realized that despite our differences, we are all in the same boat, or spaceship. I felt a sense of responsibility towards our home, to the life and lives it supports. This feeling has stayed with me ever since. Among astronauts, like me, we call this feeling the overview effect. Just take a moment to let it all sink in before you start your journey back home. Look at the northern lights and the galaxy behind. And do you see that thin blue line surrounding our incredible planet? That's the atmosphere, and it has sustained all life on Earth for millions of years. Earth is an extraordinary place. But lately, our way of life has become a threat to the very home we depend on. We have upset the balance within our environment and caused the climate to change. We need to take responsibility, not just for causing it, but for fixing it. Because it's not enough just to love our home. We need action. Let's go back.